Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rich Sports Talk. Thank you so much for joining us here today. You can always check us out wherever podcasts are available. And if you want to make sure you don't miss the latest live stream, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of our latest content. Again, always answering your questions in the comments. But if you'd like to donate to the channel or jump to the front of the line, use that super chat feature. So the game plan, ladies and gentlemen, for this weekend is I will do my best to come on after Giants-Jets preseason game on Saturday night. Of course, a lot depends if I'm able to get in my market. I know at the preseason games, it can be a little screwy like that, but I will do my best. But there's some things I want to talk about because one thing we don't really know with Aaron Glenn is how he's going to treat week 2 and week 3 of the preseason. Many teams have seemingly now used the second preseason game as more the dress rehearsal, with kind of the third preseason game now being maybe the starters get a series and then it's basically playing out the string of the guys who are competing for the final roster spots. But there are still some interesting things that I want to see with the Jets versus the Giants this week. And there's some key players that I'm very curious to keep an eye on. Again, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Again, use that super chat feature to jump to the front of the line and also comment below. So a couple players in positions I'm going to keep an eye on. Let's start at the top. Obviously, the big one is going to be Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields has had some inconsistent practices again. I'm not the hugest person on practice stats. I understand that people are worried about the incompletion percentage. Personally, I care more what Justin Fields does on game day. He played, I thought, well against the Packers. I'm curious to see how many series he gets. Now, if it's like a 10, 12-play series to kick off the game, could it be one series? Sure. I also think there's a scenario as well where with him, I could see him if it's like a quick drive or two, like let's say 4 or 5 plays and they have to punt, that basically he'll come out for a couple series. But I'm curious to see how Justin Fields will play. I do think they're going to run the ball a lot with him too. I maybe design run or two, but I do think they're going to try to get him and Garrett a couple plays in there. I do think you're going to see him try to move the ball to Ruckert. Mason Taylor is going to be an interesting one. He's been practicing, has been nicked a little bit. I'm curious to see. There's a couple guys that I think are on the bubble who won't play. I doubt Quinnen will play. I doubt Isaiah Davis will play. But I'm curious to see how Justin Fields looks in week 2. I think this will be probably the last dress rehearsal for the starters. There could be a scenario where they come out in the 3rd week, but I think this is what you're going to see from the starters in the preseason. Maybe he gets a quarter and a half, which is maybe 3 or 4 drives. So I'm very curious to see what Justin Fields does and how he performs. Again, I thought he started off well with the Green Bay game. Another key player I want to highlight, next would be a position, but a key player I think is Donovan Edwards. So Edwards has been obviously a big discussion point among Jet fans. And since he was signed undrafted, this is a popular guy. We know about his story at Michigan. Unfortunately, the injury at Michigan hasn't really seemed to be the same player, but showed that burst in the first Packers game. And one of the things that I think a lot of us here that cover the Jets have been saying is, yes, I think that there is a way to get Edwards onto the 53, but the big question is, can he contribute on special teams? Because if the team's going to carry a 4th running back, doesn't make sense. Now, the Nwangwu has been the 4th running back. We haven't seen him return kicks. I'm curious if we'll see him out there this week. But one thing that we did see this week at Giants practice was Edwards on the punt return team. I also think this spells doom for another Jet player, and I will get to that in a little bit. But to me, it's showing that the Jets view him as enough of a piece or enough of a, what I want to say in the top 60 of the guys that are going to be the final cuts that they want to have in their back pocket. Okay, if we take Edwards, he can at least contribute on the punt returns. He can maybe be the backup or the primary punt return guy. So I do think we're going to see him in this game return a couple punts. I'm curious how he does in the return game. Can he add a splash to the return game? And keep in mind with the new kickoff rules, maybe a running back like Edwards makes sense on a kick return. Now, we saw it only with the punts in practice. I'm curious if we'll see him with the kick returns, because with kick returns now, especially with the linemen that are set up and the blocking up front, linebackers instinctually are designed, that they function to find the holes in the defense, find those soft spots, find those creases that open up. And maybe that's an area where Edwards could thrive at on this team, being in the return game. I think if you were to ask me what the marquee matchup for this preseason game is, and I do think now it's gotten a little bit of fire thanks to Kayvon Thibodeau, is going to be the tackles versus the Giants pass rush. Look, you can say a lot of things about the Giants. I think the Giants are going to have a rough time this year, but do I think the Giants have arguably what could be considered one of the top pass rushes in the NFL? I do. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with Abdul Carter against the Jets' two tackles, because again, when you really think about it, both tackles are still fairly new. I almost consider Olu still a rookie because, again, he didn't play in 11 games last year, only played like the first 10. I think, though, this is a good opportunity for the Jets because I don't think you're going to really face a pass rush like this or many pass rushes like this throughout the season. So this is a great opportunity to test your mettle and also kind of set a bar for Olu and for Membu saying, hey, this is the premier of the premier at the position. This is what you're going to have to deal with on the best days in the NFL. So I do think that will be a good test. And I'm curious to see, too, because Kayvon Thibodeau has been running his mouth this week saying, we didn't get to really see Justin Fields because we were in the backfield the whole time. But even more funnier is, I guess he was on an interview earlier today, and he was asked about the 2022 draft. And he even said, when I was working out with the Jets, I didn't really finish the workout, which, again, kind of a bit of a red flag. And I wouldn't be shocked, too, especially if Abdul Carter plays as well as I think he will. I mean, there's a chance Kayvon Thibodeau is not a Giant at 2026. But I do think that this is a great opportunity for the tackles to face some premier pass rush, and I'm curious to see how they're going to do in this game. I'm also very curious to see what the interior of the line is going to look like, especially if Tippmann's going to be guard this week or center. I'm assuming center, but we'll see. And the other thing, too, is this could be a good barometer for the backup offensive lineman. I know I talked a lot about Max Mitchell really struggling the first preseason game at the guard position. Carter Warren as well. I think this is going to be a good game, especially if you can get the backups in against some of the stars or some of the primary, edge rushers that the Giants are going to use, like on special downs or at least going to be on the 53. It's going to be a good barometer to see who can stick as a backup offensive lineman, because I do think that's going to be an interesting decision with a couple of the key players. Now, my last thing on offense, and again, I'll get to the defense in a little bit. Comment below what you would like to discuss or your thoughts on the Jets or certain players. Super chat to jump to the front of the line. One player, and I'll put it like this. There's a player in a position group that I'm going to be very keen on watching, and that's the wide receiver room. For obvious reasons. And the biggest one to me is going to be Malachi Corley. I'll get to some of the other key players on this team. But as this camp has gone along, and I said it a couple months ago, I said that there was a scenario where Malachi Corley was not a member of the 2025 Jets. As this preseason has gone further along, I'm starting to get the notion that is becoming even more likely, because I just look at all the signs around Malachi Corley. Malachi Corley, look at the reps. The Jets drafted a receiver in the 4th round. Sorry, I hit the mic there for those listening to the podcast. Got a little bit too close and a little bit pumped up, but my apologies there. But let me get back on track. Arian Smith had 35 reps in the Packers game. Was obviously the 4th round pick from this regime with Darren Muji and Darren Glenn. Malachi Corley only had 18 snaps. And he really wasn't featured on the special teams. To me, Corley, to make this team, was going to have to really shine on special teams. But it already is seeming like the Jets are looking at some of their undrafted options at the return game. Now we're seeing them move Donovan Edwards into the return game as a punt returner. And all of a sudden now, Malachi Corley, with the new staff, a team that's not invested, because, again, don't forget, this regime didn't draft him. I'm curious to see what they do with Corley. And I'm almost at the point where I think this is the scenario we will see. I think Corley will get snaps in this game because, again, he's going to be within the top 8 wide receivers. I have a feeling that we're going to see a ton of Arian Smith reps. They want to give him as many reps as possible. I think that we're going to see a lot of Quentin Skinner reps. Again, big 6'5" body. I think they like him on the outside, that big basketball type body type that can go up, play that power forward position on the outside. And if they need to move on from Allen Lazard, it gives them an option. I think you're going to see a lot of Tyler Johnson because really Tyler Johnson is the only kind of receiver that Tyler Johnson is. He's the only type they have on this team. I think he's going to make this team. And again, veteran receiver. I think he's got a spot on the top 53. So the thing with Corley is if he gets special team snaps, I think there's a chance he makes a 53. If he gets 20 to 25 snaps, and if he gets play designs, like again, I'm saying a jet sweep, a wide receiver sweep, something designed for him, because we're seeing this offense under Engstrom design players open. We saw it last week with Beck out of the backfield as a fullback. He's designing plays for guys to get open. If they are not designing plays for Malachi Corley, I think the writing is on the wall. And I would make this prediction. If you do not see a lot of Malachi Corley snaps this week, what I believe you will see is him get a ton of snaps in the final preseason game. I think what you will see is kind of what the Jets did a couple of years ago with Denzel Mims. They will put him out there. They'll try to design some plays for him. They'll try to boost his value and try to find a team to take a flyer. Is there a team that will say, hey, he was a former third-round pick. We liked him in the draft process when he was coming out. We'll give you like a 6th-round pick. Or maybe it's a scenario where it's a disappointing player that a team drafted like Corley. They drafted him in a decent round, like 2nd, 3rd round, not living up to the expectations, but the Jets feel like he could be a good fit here. Maybe that's a scenario where I could see like a swapping a lotto ticket for a lotto ticket. But I don't think Malachi Corley, if you were to ask me today, in the middle of August, is Malachi Corley a member of the 2025 Jets? To be honest with you, I don't think he is. And it's unfortunate because I do think the kid has talent. We saw it last year on the jet sweep play. We know when he gets the football in his hands, he can do a lot of great things. He's an explosive wide receiver. And on a team without a lot of explosive players, you're kind of wondering, why would they give up on this guy? But I talked to Connor Hughes a couple months ago about Malachi Corley, and he said even the last coaching staff didn't love how he didn't take accountability for the play where he fumbled on the touchdown, that he didn't take it as a big deal, that he wasn't taking it serious. And look, if we've learned anything about this Aaron Glenn staff, like, you better be taking things seriously. Like, you better be going 1,000 miles an hour on every single play. And if Malachi Corley doesn't fit into that, unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be a member of the New York Jets. But I'm curious to see if he's returning kicks and punts. Maybe there's an outside chance he makes a 53. If he makes some big plays, maybe there's an outside chance. I think when you look at the preseason, for me, there's a couple things I look at. And it's a weird thing because certain players you're looking for performance. But when I look at preseason, I look at a couple things, especially for guys on the bubble. How many snaps are they getting? And certain players are not getting snaps because they've already pretty much made the team. I think Tony Adams is the best example 2 years ago. And also, does it seem like they at least have a game plan for that player? Does it seem like there is a role for that player to have? And are they running with guys that are going to be on the team? If Malachi Corley, for example, is getting a ton of snaps, but he's out there with Cook and he's out there with the guys that are not going to make this team, I think that tells you the writing's kind of on the wall for him, especially if he's going against guys that, let's be honest, in the 3rd and 4th quarter, if you look at the 22 players on the field, maybe 3 or 4 of them make the 53, couple practice squad guys in there. That's not exactly a good look. And we'll also see, too, I think, who's going to be the backup quarterback. If, from all indications, it seems like I think the Jets are hoping that Taylor, if anything, misses 1 week, maybe 2, will it be Cook? Will it be Martinez to start the season? I'm curious to see. I would guess Martinez just because he's had more reps and he's had more NFL experience, especially in the preseason. But, the Jets worked out a couple of veteran quarterbacks, Nathan Peterman. And I'm trying to think who the other one was. But I think the most fascinating thing was I was like, Nathan Peterman's still in the NFL? So on the defensive side, I think this is a good opportunity for a lot of players. I think Sauce probably won't play in this game. I think they're going to look at some of the bubble guys. Quantez Stairs, I think, who's had a really nice camp. is going to get a lot of reps at the corner position, especially with AZ Thomas still nursing an injury at the cornerback position. I'm curious to see the safety position. Dean Clark, the undrafted free agent, led the defense in snaps last week. Is it just a scenario where he was just filling snaps for the second and third string, or does this team have a higher view of him at the safety position? Because, again, we have an all-new staff. Maybe they don't love Tony Adams. The last regime loved Tony Adams, but maybe this new regime, maybe they're not as high on Tony Adams as we think. I think the biggest thing, though, if you were to ask me what is the biggest theme for, I think the team, but especially the defense, is going to be the penalties. Because we know Aaron Glenn's trying to clean a lot of things up. We know he's trying to add discipline to this team. But as good as the Packer game I thought was, the biggest takeaway that I was negative on was the penalties. Now, again, I give Glenn credit, jumped on players, took Michael Clemens out of the game, took players who made bad penalties out of the game instantly and berated them. But I want to see that get cleaned up. Now, again, in the preseason, I'm a little bit more lenient on the penalties because don't forget, too, this is also the preseason for the refs. And I used to be an official, and I know during the preseason we would work on little things. And one of the big things we were looking at is they would say, if you're on the fence, make a call, because we'll review the tape and show you the angles. We'll show you what to be looking for. We'll show you what the protocols are. We'll show you what are the things we're looking to catch. So especially in the preseason, I think the refs are a little bit more flag happy because they'd rather get the penalty called, have it time coded, sent it to the league office and reviewed and said, yes, this is what we're looking for in this situation. This was the correct call. Or is this an example of this is the wrong call because you look at the positioning here, the player had the right to the ball. So the penalties, I'm a little bit like, okay, I get the preseason are going to be more, especially when it's the third and fourth stringers making penalties. I don't really care. It's more basically I care more about the starters and the backups. But I want to see that cleaned up with this team because I do know that this has been an issue with Saleh, with Gase. This has always been an issue with the Jets. It's not just penalties, but dumb and crippling penalties. I also like, too, that last week they created turnovers. They fell on fumbles, which is something we never see. I want to see the defense continue to do that. I'm hoping Leonard Taylor III continues on what I thought was an impressive game last week. Tufolo had a great week as well. Could he be potentially starting next to Quinnen Williams? I'm very curious to see, especially with this defense, how much pressure they're going to be. Again, I thought the defense was very vanilla. They added some blitzes last week, but I'm very curious how they're going to attack this Giant team because, again, I'm curious how the Giants are going to go out. I'm assuming Russell Wilson, if he gets more than I'd be shocked if he gets more than a series. I think Jameis Winston gets a little bit of time in there. I mean, I almost get the feeling like if I was the Giants, I would try to get Jackson Dart in there second so he at least plays against some Jets starters or some high-end Jets reserves who are at least role players in the NFL. But again, I think we'll see what the Giants also think of him too, because if he's out there in the third and fourth quarter where he's going against guys that aren't going to make this Jets roster and he's cutting them up, and I know a lot of people will freak out like, oh my God, Jackson Dart made the Jets look terrible. Well, if it's against Jet players that if maybe one or two of them are going to be the 53rd man or basically the first practice squad player, that's a big difference. If he's doing against like guys like Jamie Sherwood's out there. And again, I don't think the full defense is going to be out there. And I don't think they're going to do anything incredibly exotic. But I do think it will be very interesting to see how this team attacks. Some guys I'm curious about. Eric Watts. I mean, he's a guy that I was very high coming out of college. I think he's a big defensive end. I think in a perfect world, many of us would hope he'd take Michael Clemens' spot. Michael Clemens, again, I'm keeping an eye. I think every Jet fan just wants him off this team. But if Michael Clemens does something, another stupid asinine penalty again this week, it's like, okay, enough's enough. You can't be doing that. And again, I give Glenn credit last week, benching him after that penalty. But it's just one of those things when I look at this team, I just can't say to myself, okay, I want to see a difference in how this team is approaching this defensive line and how they're approaching attacking on the defensive side. And I think they've done a very good job. I think that I was impressed with how they're getting the quarterback with the front four last week. But again, the Eric Watts was a big penalty, tackling guys out of bounds. That's something that this team definitely has to keep an eye on. It is fascinating, too, because I do want to also, I'm hoping to mention more some of the rookies on day 3. I think Arian Smith has been obviously the biggest one for the Jets because, again, I think when he came out, obviously played at Georgia, so people knew who he was. But again, the big knock on him, not being able to catch the football with the drops, I think that became a big one. And with certain receivers on the board, I mean, that was the big talking point. I mean, A.Z. Thomas has been a little bit negative. We won't see him. I'm curious. I'm hoping Malachi Moore plays. Malachi Moore's had a good camp, but again, he's been a bit nicked up. I'm not sure if they're going to hold off on him. I am really hoping, and maybe this is just selfish of me, that we see a lot more of Tyler Barron and Francisco Maioga, the linebacker and the defensive end out of Miami, both 5th-round picks. Because I felt that they were very quiet in the first preseason game. These were also guys that the Jets also traded up to get in the 5th round, trading away 2-day 3 picks that could have maybe been used on other roster spots. So I'm very curious to see how they perform. I'm hoping, especially Barron, because, I mean, Barron, Maioga, like that one's one that, okay, they have Jamin Davis as the 3rd linebacker. I think you can slow develop him at the linebacker position. But Barron's a little bit different because I feel like this defensive end room is so thin that you really are hoping that he can develop. Because trust me, on this channel, again, I see it all the time in the chat. Again, if you have any thoughts, chat, super chat, jump to the front of the line. I did feel like that's one of the things we've always talked about. I feel like people always bring up the Jets adding another wide receiver, the Jets adding a defensive tackle, and then I think shortly behind that is defensive end. Now, if I had to guess, defensive end will be a position that maybe the Jets will be looking at, especially in the first cuts. But we will definitely have to see. Look, I think Barron had a solid game against the Packers, but I want to see a little bit more of that pop, a little bit more of that pass rush in that first one. Now, again, he also made headlines earlier this week for starting a fight at camp. So, again, a little testy. So we'll see how he can do. But especially we talk about the Jets offensive line getting a great workout against this very good pass rush for the Giants. I also want to see this Jets defensive line really work against what I believe is a porous offensive line for the Giants. I don't think that this is a great offensive line. Again, I've seen a lot of headlines. My apologies. Get a little Freudian slip there. A lot of headlines this week about, the Jets offenses look terrible in practice. Jets offenses look terrible in practice. You know what offense also hasn't looked good in practice this week? It's been the Giants. I think a lot of that is because they're facing the Jets defense. So if I'm the Jets, especially with the rumor that Evan Neal might not play because he got nicked up, this is not, I think, a good Giants offensive line. I want to see this front four get after it. And I want to see these guys really put pressure on whoever the quarterback is, whether it's Jackson Dart, whether it's Russell Wilson, or maybe even Tommy Cutlets at some point. But I do want to see them basically get after, because I don't think this is a good offensive line. I don't think they're going against a good one. So I really want to see them go after them, get after whoever the Giants quarterback is, and really pressure. Because, again, I don't think the Jets are going to blitz a lot. Maybe they'll bring like a fifth man pressure. Maybe they'll do like a corner blitz at one time. Maybe they'll blitz a linebacker at some point, but they're not going to show off their exotic blitzes. I don't think they're going to show off some of their best looks, especially in the preseason. But I do want to see this team put pressure. And look, the first week I thought against the Packers, who have a good offense, I think a solid offensive line, good playmakers, I thought this defense looked really good. I thought that they made a very good performance. And I know we've talked a lot about the offense especially, again, I get the big focal point, Justin Fields and everything. But I will say, I do think this defense is going to be a strength of this team this year. I do think it's going to be a big strength of this team. And I think this team is going to surprise people. And one thing, and I'm going to go a little bit out of order here, because I think it's important when we talk about this. How do I view this team? I think that this Jet team is going to be around a 500 team. I think that if things go right, they're going to be 8-9, 9-8. But I do think that we will still be talking about them pushing for the playoffs week 15, 16, or 17, which in recent years we haven't been able to do. I just don't want to be talking about first-round quarterbacks by Columbus Day, which I've done way too many times in my career here on YouTube. But one thing I will say, and then I do think the Jets are getting a little bit overlooked, is there's still a lot of talent on this team. Look, I get the Bills. Bills being first place in the AFC East, I understand why people, especially nationally, look at that. The Patriots with Vrabel, young quarterback, I understand the appeal why people look at it. How many people nationally have just said automatically fourth place for the Jets has bothered me? Because I think the Jets are going to be a better team than the Dolphins. I know that's not a high bar, but I just look at the mess that the Dolphins are in right now. Tyreek Hill with mystery injuries, them getting bullied in practice, saying that they're not tough. Their head coach calling them out for not being tough when they've always been a finesse team. They let go of their best backup quarterback in Mike White, and now we're seeing them with Quinn Ewers and Zach Wilson, who look completely lost. And look, Mike McDaniel, he's supposed to be an offensive guru. Everyone's like, oh, Zach Wilson will figure out Quinn Ewers. I look at the Dolphins, and I'm like, does no one talking about how the Dolphins, yes, they kept their wide receivers. Yes, they still have Tua. But we're not talking about how they lost their best tackle. We're not talking about how they don't have all their captains from the previous year. We're not talking about how bad their offensive line is. We're not talking about how many great defensive players they lost. Yeah, the Dolphins will be a fun team to watch in September and October when it's 85 degrees. But we've always seen them in November, December, and January where the weather gets cold. They wilter. And here's the other thing that I don't get the Dolphins' love affair. Yes, the Dolphins were a playoff team. But last year, did you notice their record? They lost to every team that was a playoff team or an above 500 team, but won in games, every game against terrible teams. And even last year, this team didn't have any pride to finish the season. Yes, they didn't make the playoffs, but you saw it firsthand. This team flat out quit on Mike McDaniel in week 18. I know it's hard to keep going with the playoff spots on the line, but division opponent, maybe finish the season on a high note, but instead I just saw them flat out quit, which again helped Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers went out through 4 touchdowns and made himself look great, made his stats look great. And I'm like, okay, great, Aaron. It's fine. Would have been nice to see that the first 17 weeks of the season, but hey, good for you to finish your career with the Jets. So, there's going to be a lot to talk about after this second preseason game. I'm excited to watch. There's going to be a lot of headlines. I'll obviously be keeping an eye on the Jets rookies. I know Arian Smith will be a key guy to keep an eye on. I'm very fascinated to see if Quentin Skinner is going to get a lot more reps this week as well. But certain guys also you want to see kind of get going. Max Mitchell, I thought, played horrendously in the first preseason game. He's really going to have to show me something in this next one. Marcelino McCray-Ball, horrendous penalty. Michael Clemens, do I have to say more? Jeremy Rucker to me is fascinating because I don't think he had a good start to the preseason. But especially if Justin Fields gets 2 or 3 drives, I'm fascinated to see what type of rapport they have because I know he has the rapport with Garrett from Ohio State. But really, to me, Jeremy Rucker's saving grace with the Jets is going to be that he is relied on with Justin Fields. Now, I think Mason Taylor is going to be this team's number 1 tight end from all indications, but with how much heavy personnel they're going to run, how much 12 personnel, Jeremy Rucker could be a very valuable piece to this team, especially because as talented as Snow and smart is as a receiver, he's not a blocking tight end. So with Rucker, this to me is going to be a good showing of, is he heading in the right direction? Does he have that rapport with his former quarterback, or is it just not going to be a great fit? He'll be a decent role player this year, but long-term, may the Jets look to move on from him. But I know there's going to be a lot of headlines to watch in this game. There's a lot of keys I'm fascinated on, and we're going to be here to talk about afterwards. Now, let me know in the comments, especially too, because again, I'm fascinated. Now, what we usually do on this show is we will come live after every single game. Now, during the regular season, that's a little bit easier. I understand because it's usually a 1 o'clock game, come on like 4 or 5 o'clock, or even during the regular season. But let me know in the comments afterward, and I'll put a poll up on the channel. Do you want me to go live after the preseason game? Do you want me to go live at like 10 o'clock at night on Saturday? Or would you prefer a recap on Sunday at like, let's say noon, maybe early afternoon? Because again, this is also for you guys as well. I know a lot of people sometimes just check out the preseason game by the end of the first half. Let me know in the comments what you would like me to do. Again, hit that like and subscribe button so we can help with the YouTube algorithm to get as many fans here, and especially Jet fans, to the channel. Also, check us wherever podcasts are available, and comment below if you have any questions for the next video. As always, again, thank you everyone for joining us here today. We'll be back to break down Giants and Jets preseason week 2 here on Rich Sports Talk. We will see you next time.